Hey everybody, welcome to Vespers. We're so glad that you have joined us this evening for another chance to gather together, even though we're separated, and to remember that we're not alone. So we begin this evening like we do each week, celebrating the presence of Christ, who is in us, among us, and beyond us. And remembering all of those in our community of faith right now who need prayer and who may be suffering, and for all of those in our community and in our nation and everywhere this evening. We are so grateful, though, and I'm so grateful for such a warm and caring family of faith. As I look through the chat here, I can see all of your faces. I can imagine you around tables on a Wednesday evening or swapping stories and talking about how things have gone. So I am grateful for this community of faith who continues to bring hope and peace in these times as we're separated. Next week, we have another opportunity for you. This is coming up quick, and so this is the first announcement we'll have about it, and it'll go out in the newsletter tomorrow. But if you would like to share some ideas, or you have some ideas, or you just want to get together and hang out with people and talk a little bit about holiday cooking, Jamie Wallace is going to host a Zoom group next Tuesday at 7 o'clock, so I'd invite you to join us for that. You'll find that link at the top of our newsletters. It's not an instructional class per se, but it'll be a great time for people to be able to share stories and share things that you've made before for the holidays, and maybe get some ideas, and even maybe figure out some plans too as we share and talk with each other about what we're doing and how we're going to celebrate the holidays this year in this strange time that we find ourselves. So I'm excited that Jamie's going to do that for us, and excited about the opportunity for us to get together, hang out, and to share and learn from each other. So that'll be next Tuesday at 7 o'clock. Tonight, though, we have the chance to talk with Liz McCubbin. Liz has been at Central for a few years now. She came to Central from Horse Cave, Kentucky, but she's lived in several places out west as well, and her daughter Laura teaches at Henry Clay, and her grandson Foster has been staying with Liz during the day so that he can do virtual school, and so Laura can teach. So we actually get to talk with Foster today too. He's going to be there with her, and he's helped out with some tech support as well. So Liz has done lots of things at Central, but I get to hang out with Liz at knitting class, at least before the pandemic hit, and let me just say that I can attest to her grace and her patience and her persistent belief that anybody can learn, even me. So I'm grateful for the many times that I brought her some knitting and said, Liz, I don't know what I've done. And she said, I don't know what you've done either, Aaron. But she was patient enough to take the time and to work with me and to show me. So I'm grateful for Liz. And now we have a chance to get to go and talk with her as well. So let's see how she's doing. Hey, Liz and Foster, how are you all?
Good, fine. How about you?
Good. Thanks for asking. I think you're the first person that asked me. Thanks, Foster. And thanks so much, Foster, for helping get this set up. If it wasn't for you, I don't think we would still be trying to figure out how to type all these crazy numbers in. And so thanks for your technical support today. That's awesome. So how have things been going for you all since we've been having to physically distance and all that stuff lately?
Well, for me, I scheduled it last December to have surgery in June on my shoulder. So, of course, they, decided not to do any elective surgeries. So I didn't know that whether I would get to have it done or not, but I did. So the first part of the COVID was, okay. But by the time I had surgery, I was going to have to be at home anyway. I couldn't drive.
Yeah.
So it was probably the best time I could have had surgery. I had my left shoulder replaced, and it's doing fine. I've graduated from PT. And but I couldn't drive for 4 to 6 weeks, so I was homebound anyway. And I was busy doing PT, getting over the surgery, and just doing things. And then, of course, school started. School didn't start.
Right.
And Father's been with me since school started. So I have him here. So it's not like I've been alone or not been able to see anybody.
Right.
So that's kind of a nice thing, you know.
Yeah, well,
And I'm going to miss him when they open schools again.
I know. Well, that's great that you all have been able to be together and do this. I know, Foster, your mom is teaching, right, at Henry Clay?
Yep, we both have Zoom schedules, and so she does better at school, at her school, and she's not really allowed to take anyone there other than herself. So I have to stay with my grandma so they know that I'm doing my work.
I know you do it on your own anyway, but it's great. It's good to have the company, isn't it? It's nice. Yeah.
Yeah, I tell people I'm the principal, the cook, and the nurse. And not he teaches himself.
Well, that's great. Well, as an educator yourself, Liz, you got a lot of experience with that, don't you? Yeah. Well, so tell us a little bit about your history. You know, where you grew up, how you got to Central.
Okay, it may be kind of a long story. I was born in Richmond, Virginia, in 1938, and it was during right before and during World War II. And so we were there. I lived there till I was 5 years old. And then my dad was drafted, and was going to be drafted. Got a letter, he's going to be drafted. So he was a manager of an F.W. Woolworth store in Richmond, Virginia, if you've ever heard of them. You know, the old dime store. And he had to give up his job and his apartment and everything, got his uniforms, and then he got this letter saying that the war was winding down and they weren't going to need him. And so he'd already given up his job, they'd given up our apartment, you know, and all this stuff. So he was kind of left in limbo. So we moved to Knoxville, Tennessee. And we lived with my grandparents for a little while. Dad helped put in stokers, if you know what those are, furnaces and stokers. The stokers grind the coal into the furnace.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Coal, yeah. And so Dad helped install those with my granddad. And they both like to be boss. So that didn't last real long. And we moved, and I tell you, I went to 13 different elementary schools, so I cannot remember what order I was in and lived in those places. Well, sometimes we would be there 6 months, you know, or whatever. So we did that, and then we moved to Camelsville, where my dad bought interest in a store, a dime store. And so we lived there the longest I lived any place as a child, and that was till I was the middle of my senior year in high school. And the middle of my senior year in high school, Dad bought a store in Horse Cave, Kentucky. So I changed schools the middle of my senior year of high school and graduated from Caverna, not Camelsville.
Oh, wow.
And, yeah. So my life was very varied, you know.
Yeah.
And so I can't, like I said, I can't tell you all the places. I can tell you, I know I lived in North Carolina and South Carolina, Tennessee. I lived in a couple of places, 3 places actually, in Kentucky, and I can't. That's you know.
Yeah.
And so that's all kind of just mixed in together, you know.
Yeah.
I have stories I could tell about in those different places, but it's not having a, you know, I remember that we traveled on the train a lot. We didn't own a car. Dad had a car, and during the war it was so hard to have one because everything was rationed.
Yeah.
So he sold it. So we walked or took the streetcars. I loved the streetcar. I loved putting the money in the change and hearing it clank, clank, clank as it went down, you know. And so we rode the streetcars everywhere. Or if Mother needed to go to the grocery, she put us in the little red wagon and pulled us to the grocery store, and then we held on to the little red wagon full of groceries on the way home.
Right.
And I remember those things. And my dad taught us how to skate before we could walk almost. So my brother broke his arm racing on some older boys on skates when he was 4 years old. And so we had the roller skates that you tighten onto your shoes.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and so when those skates would wear out, we'd take the ball bearings and we'd put those when the ball bearings were out, we'd take those wheels off the skates and we'd make us scooters using old wooden crates.
Oh.
And so, so you didn't waste anything, And then we'd have a scooter for a while till it wore out.
Yeah.
We started cycling again. So we had a lot of fun along the way, doing different things. But that was my beginning, where my mom and dad never went to church. So my grandmother in Knoxville, Tennessee, was the first person that ever took me to church, or my sister or my brother. And so I went to church with my grandmother. The first time I went, it was Dr. Pollard, who happened to be a very well-known Baptist preacher, but he was one of those yelling, hellfire damnation pastors, And he scared me to death. And I came out and asked my grandmother why he was so mad. What was he so mad about? He had to fit in the times of today, I think. And so anyway, that was my first experience of going to church. My grandmothers who introduced me to Jesus and church, and my sister and my brother, same thing. And eventually all three of us were saved. And everywhere we moved, we went to church. And we walked to church. We walked to the nearest church that was closest to us, because we walked in the rain or the snow. Mom and Dad didn't mind if we went.
Yeah.
But they didn't take us. We walked. So we walked to the nearest church. So it might be Baptist, it might be Methodist, it might be whatever. So I had a whole mixture of different kinds of churches that I attended as growing up. Eventually in Campbellsville, joined the First Christian Church there. And that's where I was saved or baptized. And my brother and my sister too also.
Now, which of you all, was it one of you, or was it collective that you all decided to go to church on your own? Because that's a big thing for kids to decide.
Well, I think we were just little.
Yeah.
The three of us were, because when I first went to church, I was 6 years old. And of course, my brother and sister, that's the first time they went, so one was younger and one was older. And after that, we just kind of as a trio. I don't remember even making that decision. I just know we went.
Yeah.
And I know that Mom and Dad never stopped us from going. And they always dressed us up.
Right.
But they didn't. Yeah. My dad read his Bible almost all his life, but he didn't go to church. He always told me he didn't go because he had to go when he was growing up. They were Church of Christ, and that he had to go, and he had to wear somebody else's shoes because they were very poor, and his feet hurt. And every time he walked in church, his feet would hurt. That's what he always told me. I have no idea.
Yeah. Oh, goodness. That's funny. Well, tell us a little bit about how you got to Central.
How I got to Central?
Yeah.
Okay, I have always been, I lived in New Mexico. I lived in Johnny, Mexico. That's where I had my first child. I went out there to teach school. This is kind of a long story, but it gets me there. And then we moved to Kermit, Texas, and Jesse, my son, and Paul, and Laura, his mother, were born there. And we were out there for 10 years. And then the marriage kind of went kaput, and I came back here. And I'm always one of these people, the first thing I do is I call shop for a church.
Right.
I have to have a church family. So that's the first thing I do. I go to visit different churches. So that's what I did when I came here. So I had gone to a couple of other churches, And I knew I was at the age where I needed to be a church nearby, because there would be time when driving would be a little harder, and I wanted it close enough that I could get there till I could not drive anymore, at least. So I went to Emmanuel, and I went to another church that no longer exists here. Emmanuel bought it. That was on, what's the road your school's on?
Pittsburgh?
No, it turns out to, well, anyway, it was a little church there. And I went in there, and nobody even spoke to me. And I walked around the church, all around the church, looking for some class that looked like my age, because I went to Sunday school. And finally just walked into a Sunday school class, and nobody spoke to me. They didn't ask me who I was. I could have been there to, whatever. And so I thought, and then I went into the church sanctuary, sat through the church, and nobody really spoke to me. I thought, well, this is definitely not the church for me, And so then I went to Emmanuel. Well, by the time I went to Emmanuel, I'd had hip surgery. And so Emmanuel was just too big for me to manage physically. It wasn't that they were unfriendly. They were very nice, and a couple of people came here to visit and everything. But it was just too large for me to navigate physically. So I had already been to Central once before I had surgery, once or twice. So I went back again, and you hear everybody say this, is what really impressed me is how friendly they are.
Yeah.
I mean, you walk in the door and not one person talks to you. Anybody at the door talks to you, stops and welcomes you and so on and so forth, shows you where your class is and all of this. And they happened to take me right into the right class where I seemed to fit. And so that's what brought me to Central. And because I guess I've had a diverse life. I like diversity.
Yeah.
And they welcome everybody.
Yeah.
I don't care who you are, they welcome everybody.
Yeah.
So that attracted me. Yeah. And of course Carol and Connie and Catherine Salee, they were, and Mary Jo Burks, they were, and Mary Showalter, they all were, right there for me. So
yeah,
it would just fit.
Yeah.
And it's still,
yeah, it's a beautiful thing that I still pinch myself quite often and say, is this really a church? Because folks are so nice and caring.
I'm Southern Baptist, and there are some people that are real not gung-ho about Southern Baptists. so I tell people I still have my Southern Baptist background. And in fact, I told Mark, I said, now, when I join this church, I'm a Southern Baptist,
right.
And that won't change. Right. So you have to take me that way or not. I did. I told you, if the church doesn't want to accept me, that's fine, but that's right.
Yeah.
And that didn't seem to be a problem, So, all right with that. So,
yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah.
They, that's how I got to Central. And nobody's really bugged me about being Southern Baptist. No.
Well, I mean, we all come from different backgrounds and different places. I grew up Southern Baptist, and so I think these are all a lot of shared experiences that many folks have, and really the beautiful thing about Central is that. I see again and again the emphasis is on caring for one another, for caring for people and showing compassion to each other, and that's a beautiful thing that binds us together, and a great place.
In my career, of course, working with special needs children, I guess starting out with that many years ago, you learn to accept everybody belongs to God. Everybody was created by Him. So, that's what I like about Central.
Yeah.
I think that most people at Central, if not all, feel that way, that we all belong there.
Yeah.
Our decision as to whether we want to accept him as our Savior, but he created us.
Yeah. Well, I love the way you say that. Everybody belongs to God. That's a beautiful way to say that too. Yeah, I think that's definitely the feeling that we're all loved by God, that we're all part of this family together. So that's great. Well, tell us a little bit about your career. You talked about. I know you taught for a long time. Is there is there maybe something that you've learned in your years of teaching and working with special needs children that have really brought given you some maybe insight into where we're at now today?
Well, one thing I'd like to say that I grew up. I had kind of a tough childhood, and then I grew up with my brother, who was different, or became different, and my sister. And I had an uncle, my only uncle, who was severely cerebral palsied. And my granddad carried him to school every day. He didn't learn to walk till he was 16. And because back then you didn't have what you have today and to help people like that. So he carried him to school every day. He couldn't walk. And so he graduated from high school. My granddad was a big believer in education and learned to put in those stokers and furnaces and support himself.
Wow.
And that taught me a lot, having those things in my family. Taught me a lot, because people looked at my Uncle Harry and thought he was mentally retarded, which is not a word I like to use, and because he was all gnarled up, which we tend to do that. We tend to think if somebody has this handicap, then they have this handicap or whatever. And so I learned a lot through that. And then he was one of the bravest people I've ever known. He traveled by himself, and he would get on the train and travel, And one day he was at our house visiting in Camelsville, and we were playing baseball, a bunch of us were, and the kids started making fun of him. Well, I got in a fight with one of the kids because, you didn't make fun of my Uncle Harry.
Yeah.
So and he stopped me and he sat down and talked to me about that, and about how he was used to that had been all his life, and the best way to do is just walk off and ignore it. That fighting wouldn't solve anything. And so he taught me a lot. Very wise person, and so he was a huge influence in my life. I didn't realize that, at the time, though.
Yeah.
So I graduated from college in education because my dad said that was the only way I could go to school. And they were kind of dominating parents. So I did, thinking, well, I'll decide that on my own after I graduated. Worked my way through college, held down 2 jobs, graduated in 3 years with about 40 more hours than I needed. I would take 20 to 22 hours a semester and then go through the summer too.
With 2 jobs? With 2 jobs?
2 jobs.
Wow.
And no, there's no sleep.
Yeah.
You didn't sleep. you couldn't sleep. And so anyway, I got through college and everything, and I was just 20 and taught a year at Caverna, and I didn't like it. I didn't like the teaching, but it's all I had at the moment.
Yeah.
And I accepted a job in Downey, Mexico to teach. And the reason for that is I needed to get away from my family and find out who I am. I needed to get away from some things. So I went out there to teach, and I was teaching 5th grade, low average children, because that's what they did to them back then. There was the low average, the medium, and the high, all divided out. And so in that class, I had some kids that, well, my principal had told me one of them was one that just didn't have it. but the parents couldn't reconcile with that. So they would push me. They would be hard to deal with and everything. Well, when she left my 5th grade class, she was on above grade level.
Wow.
And she went on to become a special ed teacher.
Wow. That's amazing.
Yeah, it is. It's amazing. And I realized, and I had another 2 or 3 that happened to, and I realized that was kind of my knack.
Yeah.
You know, my niche. And that's what I enjoyed doing, working with that child, you know, one-on-one rather than, you know, 20 or 30. So I came back to Horace K, finished my master's degree as a single parent, working 2 jobs, teaching. And back then you got paid like $3,000 a year. Yeah. You know, and which was less than I made half a day in Texas, you know.
Oh, goodness.
And, so, and got my master's degree in special ed.
Yeah.
And that I loved. That was my niche. And I guess you see what a winding plate, how long it took God to guide me into that? It was a winding pathway, and I think He guided me. Every experience I had was guiding me into that.
Yeah.
You know, I could say it was a bad experience at the time, but there was something I learned that got me ready for that. And I think God, if we listen to God, and I think our Sunday school lesson kind of taught that if you listen to God, He'll take you on your pathway.
Yeah. That's beautiful. So, sometimes it takes some of us a long time to to find what that is.
He had to give me a little kick every now and then to get me turned in the right direction.
Yeah. Well, that's beautiful though, that you find a niche. You can see those things that you're good at, and a way that you can make a difference in so many lives with students who need some help, somebody to believe in them for, you know.
And lo and behold, I had a son who had severe learning disabilities, which I was beginning to suspect before I moved here, but it came to real fruition after I moved here. And so my experience with him, and I've told him this, is I'm not glad he had that. It was a real struggle for him, you know. But I learned so much to what parents go through with a special needs child as the child too.
Right.
You know, seeing the whole 24-hour thing and what parents go through. And I understand why some of them get really angry when you tell them that their child has this special need, because they don't want to really hear, some don't really want to hear that. They may know it deep down. Yeah. That's a hard thing to face sometimes, you know. Yeah. So that was another learning lesson that God gave me in handling all that, which was difficult at times.
Yeah.
But,
well, tell us a little bit too about how things are going now and what's going on. Foster, what about you? How's school been lately? How have things been different for you since we've had to socially distance?
Tell him what happened to you last week. Yeah, you know, the visit.
Oh, yeah. So, I'll start at first with, when I was first doing it last year, it was really difficult because it was very unorganized. And so everyone was probably really confused, especially the teachers. And now sometimes it's still confusing, but for the most part we all understand it. And some people who are hands-on learners, it's more difficult for them. Like one of my friends, she's like having a really difficult time with some of her classes because she's a hands-on person. But I am more of an audible learner, more of a visual learner with like help from hearing people explain it. So I can do pretty well because I have both of those. And I also decided to change my work ethic this year because I wanted to do better. And so that apparently worked out, because last week, I think it was, is when my teachers came and gave me a pizza and candy because I was student of the week. Because they had noticed I was doing so well and I had gotten practically all A's. I had a few B's. I had one D for some reason, but I had practically all A's.
That is awesome. That is so great. And student of the week too. That is so cool.
From Tate's Creek Middle School.
Yeah. Oh, well, congratulations. That is great. I mean, because this is a really hard time to, like, it takes a lot of determination to stay focused right now when they're on Zoom classes and doing all that. So
He does that most of the time. He stays pretty focused. He doesn't.
Yeah.
He usually likes to stay here later than I first thought he was going to stay, because he stays here and wants to get his work done before he goes home.
Or I say I want to get my work done, but then I end up being bored and getting on my phone.
yeah.
That's a struggle. Of course, that goes with the pandemic.
Sometimes the phone is put up on the bookcase.
Right. Well, that's hard, but at the same time, hey, that's some great progress. You decide to work on that, you know, and you're making working hard at it. It sounds like, so that's awesome. Yeah.
Thank you.
We're real proud of him.
Yeah.
It does work for him best. You know, I don't want to embarrass him, but I'm going to tell this. If it embarrasses you, he'll take it out.
It's okay.
His desk is my grandmother's treadle sewing machine, which is what he chose for it to be. And I thought it would be a good idea because he likes to pedal that thing, and it kind of helps him stay focused when he's doing something else too.
Yeah.
So when he's in there, I can hear that thing just going really fast. And then every time's slow, and sometimes not at all. But I know when it's going really fast, he's focusing on something.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. Well,
And he can't do those things in the classroom, you know.
exactly. Well, and just from hearing you talk, Foster, it sounds like it's pretty obvious that you come from a family of educators, because you sound very, very self-aware of your own learning styles and habits. So it sounds like you've gotten you're well on your way. What are you thinking about doing? Do you have any thoughts for maybe what you want to do as a career?
I really have no idea. I mean, I could go into something with science, or I could go into something with math, because I'm good with math, and most science requires math, and I like science. So really, I could go into something with either of those, but it's kind of difficult. And I wish I'm kind of jealous of Nani here, because I really wanted a kick to know what I should do. But for now, it's up to me to figure out. So I'm going to have to...
He can ask God about it. God will let him know eventually.
Yeah.
Maybe with a kick.
Maybe with a kick, you know. Sometimes you never know. Sometimes just...
better than I did when I was.
Liz, did you happen to have a devotion?
I have this. This is one of my favorite verses or parts of the Bible, and it's Psalms 139. I won't read the whole thing, but it starts out, "You have searched me, Lord, and you know me." Isn't that nice and scary too?
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, when I sit and when I rise, you know, and it goes on through that. But my favorite part of it is, and my mother was abusive, so I grew up in an abusive home, and that was tough, you know. And that's when I learned how to rely on God and Jesus so much, you know, is when I had a really tough day after everybody went to bed, and this sounds like I'm crazy, but that would go with the family. I would get up and go downstairs and out in the dark and sit there on the tree and out loud talk to God and vent whatever my feelings were for the day. And I could never understand why God would create somebody that couldn't be loved, because that's what I felt, you know, that I couldn't be loved. If your mother doesn't love you, who can love you, you know? So I read this verse, I don't know, I was an adult, into adulthood. And it said, "For you created my inmost being. You knit me together in my mother's womb. I praise you because I'm fearfully and wonderfully made. Your words are wonderful. I know that full well. And that opened a door for me. It suddenly was like, hey, I'm not unlovable. Hey, that's not what this says. God doesn't create somebody that can't be loved,
Yeah.
And so that verse has been extremely important to me in my lifetime. It totally turned it around in a way, in my innermost being. And so the whole Psalm 139 is very meaningful, but that particularly is. And that might not be exactly what it means. And isn't it funny that it talks about being knitted?
Yeah, it is, isn't it?
But that you knit me together. He knitted me.
Yeah.
And I was important enough that he created me. Mm. So I have to be lovable in some way or the other anyway. That's the way my mind went with it, And so that's a very meaningful verse for me. Yeah.
That sounds like great theology to me, Liz.
I don't know about that. It is to me.
If there's a theme that runs through that book, I think that's it. You are loved and lovable by God. And
God doesn't create anything unlovable. We may turn out to be that way. Some people might. I don't know. I've had a hard time in my life that I can think of very few people that I couldn't find something to like about them.
Yeah.
Sometimes you have to search a little harder.
Right.
And it might not be them, it might be you. Your personality just don't jive,
Yeah.
But if you want to look hard enough, if you want to take that time, you can find it.
Yeah.
And that's a great thing, actually.
It is.
So it's another one of those things, that experience that I had in my life, that I learned a lot from.
Yeah. Well, and that it sounds like a very healing experience for you, and then you're able to spend your career and so much of your life giving and helping to show others that they're too,
correct,
loved and accepted.
And it helps understand kids who come out of those kinds of situations too.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that.
So that's very, very important. Our battery is about to die.
Oh, well, that means it's time. So
God is telling us it's time to go.
This is the kick. So, well, it was such a joy to get to talk with you, Liz, and to get to talk with you too, Foster. Thank you so much for hanging out with us and for talking with us. It was great. And so
he's a pretty good guy.
I think so, and good at tech support too. So thank you, and you all stay safe, and hopefully we'll get to see you in person before too long.
Oh, that would be great.
Yeah.
Wouldn't it? You stay safe too.
Okay.
We're getting our knitting articles together.
I know. That sounds great. Okay, we'll talk to you later.
All right. Bye-bye.
Okay. Bye. See ya. Thank you so much, Liz and Foster, for taking time out to share with us. It was great to get to hear your stories again, and just like I saw in the chat, yeah, it does feel like we're back in story group again, sitting around and swapping stories with each other. So thanks so much for doing that, Liz. We truly are grateful that you're part of our family of faith. Thank you. So let's sing a song before we go. He's got the whole world in his hands. 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 He's got you and me, brother, in his hands. He's got you and me, sister, in his hands. He's got you and me, brother, in his hands. He's got the whole world in his hands. got everybody here. In his hands, he's got everybody there. In his hands, he's got everybody here. In his hands, he's got the whole world in his hands. He's got the whole world in his hands. Amen. Sometimes it takes a little more faith to sing that song than others, but I know and I trust, and I'm reminded again by your all's presence with me as we continue to see each other through chats and through email and through cards and through Zoom meetings, that God still does have this entire world in God's hands, and that God is continually working for justice and peace and for wholeness for us, for our communities, for our country, and for our world. That God is always working to bring goodness and hope and love and unity and fairness. And so we have the opportunity to jump in, to join in that good work of healing, that good work of restoration and redemption as we have found grace. And we can extend that to others and to the world and be part of God's healing work. So thank you for doing that. Thank you for being part of that work as this family of faith, and for continuing to bring that encouragement to those not only in our body of Christ, but also well beyond that into our communities, into our world. Don't forget, next week, join us for some holiday cooking tips and bring some recipes to share on Tuesday at 7. And then on Sunday, we'll be back at church right here on this YouTube channel. You can find us again. Look for all those updates in our newsletter. If you'd like more updates on the prayer list, or you'd like to view that or send in a request, you can go to lexcentral.com/pray and find out about that and see the email where you can send us an email as well to connect with us there. And we hope that you'll do that too, and join one of our Sunday school classes or a Thursday school class, or the baby boomers that are meeting bi-weekly now. So you can find all those at lexcentral.com/Zoom. Thanks again so much for being here this evening. Now, go in peace.